All right, I think we're a couple minutes in. We'll go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everyone who's joined us this afternoon. We are in an unprecedented time, and we're taking an unprecedented approach for our organization on how we approach our webinars. Today, instead of a formal webinar with multiple slides and talking points and analysis and charts, we're going to take an agile, free-flowing approach to a couple of very important topics over the past 2 weeks. As we have turned into a work-from-home society overnight, there are a lot of questions that are coming in from organizations of all sizes, commercial enterprises, nonprofits, federal, about productivity, about ensuring employees have everything they need to work. And today, myself, Mason Chaudhry, I'm the Chief Transformation Officer at Excion, Bhavani Krishnan, who is our Agile subject matter expert, and Keith Braddock, who is, I would consider, a master of all trades in technology with 25 years of experience supporting teams. We're going to converse on practical tips on how we can keep our teams running well, keep not only productivity going, but keep morale going. And today we're going to talk about something very important, keeping your culture going as we're all dispersed. We're all in a telework momentum. So with that, before we start, I'd like to mention a couple of things. We're going to allow questions. This is truly a question and answer session. We're going to have a window that you can see on your screen. You send the question, hit submit, and we're going to try to weave your question in to our conversation. We are recording today's session. We will share it later today. If you'd like to share it, folks can use the link to sign into the webinar to come back and see it live. And I want to tell you all something. If we get a robust conversation going today, there are going to be other topics that are going to be germane over the next few weeks as we all telework that we would love to discuss. So expect to hear from us again on this type of forum. So with that, let's go ahead and kick it off. I think our first topic is going to be empowering remote teams. I know a lot of people have been involved in ensuring the platforms are there, folks have their and security access. So with these things said, let's start with Mr. Braddock. Keith, in your opinion, what does it take from a setup perspective to get people successful in a remote environment?
Thank you, Mason, and welcome everybody. It's a great question. I think one of the things that we're all discovering is in a world where we thought the ISPs had it all together about the bandwidth, we're all discovering bandwidth challenges with everyone being remote. I think the biggest thing from a technology perspective is we say, you're going to see a lot of people talk about this as being the new normal. I believe that this has been around for a very long time. You have organizations like GitLab and other organizations that have gone 100% remote. They have a large employment base that's remote in 63 different countries. We in the US, I think, are having to learn how to adapt to a world where we don't physically see everyone. And how do we do that? What technologies do we use to keep that community that we have in the workplace and allow for that to continue so it feeds through our culture as we continue to get work done? And I think using technologies, whether it's Teams, whether it's Slack or Mattermost or things like that, whatever your organization uses to make sure that you have continual connectivity, being able to do impromptu screen shares, chats, video conferencings, things that where the technology, the complexity of the technology removes the barriers of being able to reach out to a colleague in a quick second to get that feedback. I think that is a major piece, that continual feedback loop being done in a way, leveraging the technology that we have today, that allows us to be remote, but feel still connected and close. Gotcha.
So then, Bhavani, with what Keith's saying, your bread and butter is bringing teams together and coaching them how to work in an agile manner. What are the prerequisites? What are the bare minimums, no matter what the industry is, for teams to provide their resources in order to work in this type of environment?
So Mason, as Keith was saying, so he was talking about some of the tools and some of the ways that they can feel connected, whether they're agile or not. other than, just the Teams and the Slack channels and Zoom sessions, I think it's really important to create a virtual team space for them now more than ever, right? Again, whether you're agile or not, I think it's important to make sure that you have a champion. You make sure that everybody is heard and listen to them now, again, more than ever, right? Even when you're following agile and you may have a scrum master, make sure that they are not the only one that's speaking. Have better facilitation techniques, right? And I've seen more and more, even when you are present physically co-located, not everybody engages at the same level, right? So now, when you're remote, it's even more harder to get those people to speak up, those people to engage. So it's really important that you set the agenda, you plan the meeting, you keep the audience on track, and keep tab at the time, have open-ended questions, acknowledge everybody, and move the group to action-oriented tasks. So I think it's.
Let me ask you this, though, Bhavani, with something you just said. I'm sure everyone listening just had the amount of meetings on their calendar double or triple in the past 2 weeks. How do you actually discern when is the right time to set a meeting and when is the right time to get an IM or a team chat or something going?
I think it's important that they follow the plannings, right? When Agile, we say there are 5 important plannings and nothing outside of that, unless you have some follow-on questions or follow-on, sessions that you need to get to. But outside of that, if you meet those 5 plannings, on a daily basis, if you attend the 15-minute daily stand-up, that kind of helps you to plan for your day, answers a lot of questions, so you avoid that back and forth on the emails. So that's really important. And another thing,
just real quick, Bhavani, for those who are not conducting daily stand-ups, do you suggest them? Because not everyone on the phone and is in a development or a pseudo-development environment. For those who are working outside of those spheres, what is your opinion of daily stand-ups?
It's important. It's non-negotiable in my opinion. And I'm not talking about just the Agile teams. I have an 18-year-old and an 8-year-old, and even the 8-year-old has a daily stand-up now. They don't call it the daily stand-up, but they call it everyday check-in, right? That's all it is. You're checking in. You're making sure that everybody's on the same page. So, you don't have to call it the stand-up. You don't really have to stand up, and you don't really have to be Agile teams. But the importance is that you're collaborating. You're getting on the same page. You're understanding where everybody else is. You're making sure that you're planning for the day ahead, even when you're remote.
Gotcha. So
Mason, Bhavani,
go ahead.
So just Mason, just tag on that. And I think the key here is when you talked about the meetings stacking up, and we're experiencing that here at Excion, right? We've had more meetings, more connectivity, which is a good thing. I think you always have to be cognizant that when you move to emergency situations such as this, you try to be consistent in your behavior from what you did previously to what you do now. If you are an organization that has daily stand-ups and you connect on a regular basis, you continue to do that. All you're doing is using the technology to make that more in person. If you aren't an organization that does that, and you want to move to that, I caution you to move very carefully, because what you don't want to do is feel like, you don't trust me, so thus you must always want to connect with me now that I'm remote. What you want to do is make sure that you're sending a message that is consistent with the message previously.
Very important. Yes, I completely agree. And as Keith was saying, if you're an organization that had this and continue to do that, but if you are an organization that did not have that, again, we would both recommend, I will let Keith to speak for himself, but I would definitely recommend that, it's a good idea to set the team norms, right? It's very important to acknowledge the weakest link and adjust accordingly to that. And I say that because not everybody might have the fiber optic connection, right? Not everybody might have the speed that you might have, and you might feel that you can connect to at a split second. And the other thing is assign, buddies, both for technical and emotional support, and check on them periodically. And would caution and I would recommend that the leadership to reach out more frequently now, and try not to play a hero. And it's okay to let others see your human side, right? Reassure where you can, and encourage to take breaks throughout the day. And I think these are some of the important, but I mean, these are some of the small but yet important steps that the leadership should, and I'm hoping that everybody is adapting to.
Yeah, so let me ask you all a question here. You guys mentioned a couple of things. You mentioned a micromanagement element, and on the other side of that equation is the out of sight, out of mind element. So some might think, all right, management's on me, making sure I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. Do they trust me? On the other hand, there are folks who've been interacting 24/7 with people. They're used to coming into people's offices, and now they're like, the people know I exist. Am I here? With that type of a balance that you have to achieve, help me understand, how do you look at tools like organizations have? Keith mentioned Git and Jira. You have all these project and process tools. Then you have Zoom and Slack and Teams. What's the appropriate channel and when? Keith, why don't you dive in?
I think Bhavani alluded to it. It's the norms. When there's two different organizations here. There are the organizations that have been doing kind of online tracking of initiatives, whether you're using Kanban boards or if you're using Safe, whatever tool that you're using, whether you use Slack, Teams, Skype repeatedly within your organization. What you want to do first is have some consistency in the leverage of those tools. You talked about, well, what happens if you're a continuous connectivity person? You want to always reach out to someone. You can do that via a quick chat on Teams, on IM, or Slack, or any of the most of those tools, and keep those the difference. The separation is, and I think Bhavani started to go there, is everything should be purposeful. If I'm having a meeting where multiple people are going to be in this discussion, and it's a meeting that we would normally have a conference call, then I would go to your conference call tool set, whether it's using Teams, whether it's using Zoom, whether it's using any of those types of tool sets that are for conference calls. If I'm reaching out to my project team and I want to share something I discovered or share a note, that would be that team space that Bhavani mentioned, right? You want to have those set up and defined so that that's a free-flowing place where the team can share information back and forth. And then if it's, I need to reach out to a colleague that I'm a buddy with, then you can leverage the instant chat or the instant video conferencing that you have through Teams, Slack, or Skype. Leverage those systems to have that kind of face-to-face communication in a more targeted way. What you do not want to do is overwhelm your schedule. People are starting to talk. I've talked to colleagues that aren't used to this, and they're all of a sudden they're saying, "Wow, I'm busier than I thought I would ever be. I'm busier than I was when I was on a standard in the office. What happened?" And many times, what happens is we feel this overwhelming need to basically communicate more, to be more interactive. And when you don't do things normal, from moving from one situation to another and not keeping that normality across the board, you start to have disruption to your life. And those things can be somewhat.
That makes sense. Bhavani, would you agree or disagree there?
Well, I agree with everything Keith was saying, although I want to go back to a point that you made, Mason, prior to Keith starting, was something around the lines of micromanagement. Yeah. I want to clarify, and I'm sure that you didn't mean it that way, right? It's very important to keep the balance. Again, to what Keith mentioned about overwhelming, although we want the managers and the leadership to reach out to their teams more now, we don't want it to make it overwhelming. We don't want it to seem like they don't trust their people, and that's where they're reaching out. I mean, this is not about spying on you or making sure that you're doing what you're supposed to. We're all professionals, and I'm sure that they're all trustworthy professionals, right? And at one point or not, we have all worked from home. We have all worked remotely. So I'm assuming that there are better ways to communicate than what the organizations are going through today. But yeah, completely agree with what Keith is saying.
All right, so we're 2 weeks in. I look at it as a 2-week sprint for the country on work from home. We're all joining a lot of meetings. There's someone who's joined this webinar who I used to work with at Anthem, and she was, I think, a PM on the project. We were on so many calls together that we knew each other's dog barks. I could be like, Bhavani, go on mute because your chihuahua's barking. We could tell by the barks. So now that we're going into the second sprint of the new normal, let's give some tips on collaboration, when we should use video, when we shouldn't, what's considered asynchronous, when should it be something structured. Any tactical tips in that regard? Bhavani, I'll start with you.
I think it's common sense, right? I mean, I think it was a blog post or whatever that said that there was a woman that went to the restroom while her meeting was on. So it's just common sense, right? Make sure that you have the basic etiquettes for that. And apart from that, I mean, I definitely encourage, video meetings now. Again, I keep saying more than ever, it's because that's in everybody's mind, right? Everybody wants to make sure that they are present, that they are heard, that they're seen. And we kind of need that kind of normalcy around us. And I think this is the only medium outside of what we can do, that we have normally been doing. So that's one thing. And the other thing is keeping folks engaged, right? When you are in a video meeting, make sure that you definitely need the video meeting, like planning sessions for one thing, right? Or retros for another. When you are trying to keep the meeting together and we're trying to help motivate your workforce, that's one area where you probably will need, your video chat and you're like, trying to maybe just, keep it light and make jokes out of it and virtual happy hours or whatnot. So I think videos are important there. But other than that, I don't think that you really, really need video chats all the time. Again, that's my take on it.
And so before I switch to my question to Keith, Bhavani, one more. Who should make those determinations? Is it management or individuals? Where does the line come from? This is when we recommend you use video, and this is when we recommend you don't.
I think there are companies, as companies are getting used to this, the HR is coming up with a lot of, work from home etiquettes and meeting etiquettes, and they are outlining some of the do's and don'ts. But outside of that, I think it depends on the team norms again. Like I had a planning session with my team yesterday, and I opened it up for the team to chime in terms of, so what do you guys think? When should we use video and when should we not? And I would also want to caution everybody that when you are using your video chat, you are actually compromising the speed of your data, right? So that's there too. So make sure that you are available, and if you have to compromise on the video and go on audio, then that's it's a no-brainer.
Yep. All right. So Keith, when we work together, you and I were very used to coming to each other's door when we got a question. It's not always an IM. We're not working at Apple. There's not 100,000 people in our organization. So that hallway chatter has led to some amazing, in the moment ideas and productivity on your whiteboard. How do you replace that now that we're working from home?
And I think Bhavani mentioned that's where those workrooms are. And I think it's interesting. I look at my 15-year-old. And comparative to me, I'm a little bit over 50. I'm just shy over 50, and the difference in how we approach communication, right? It's very easy for me to pop into an office and say, "Hey, I was thinking about this," and I talk out loud, right? Today, my 15-year-old doesn't read email. If it isn't a text or a tweet or or something else, they don't recognize that it exists. I think you have to be adaptive. You have to be willing to change, and you use the mediums to do that. So for instance, you do have set times that you may interact throughout the day and say, okay, we're going to leave an open line, or we're going to have a room that we all can go into. And you start adding things like virtual whiteboards. So you do have to add some new technology and say, can we do a virtual whiteboard so we can have that functionality? One of our colleagues, Anand, who's one of our leads in the data space, we had a conversation and we were looking at different tools about how can you do virtual whiteboards better. So it's engaging in those conversations. It's about thinking differently. It's a mind shift to understand that actually in this world, I have more connectivity to you than I did when we were in the office, right? Because you eat, whether you're eating dinner or whether you walk outside, whatever that is, the tool that we use is I'm available on the phone, it's available on the desktop. I have more connectivity to you. And because you're not in that formal office, you feel more of a need or a responsibility to immediately respond. And so the thing that I want us to, going back to that earlier point, is that you talked about what are the boundaries. And I think first of all, from a personal perspective, you have to get up every morning and you have to bring normalcy to your schedule. That means if you normally take a shower at 6 o'clock, continue to do so. If you normally eat breakfast at 7 o'clock, do so. It's that normalcy that makes it everything better, right? Easier to adjust to. And I think then it's, you talked about the difference between video and not video. It's okay if you feel like you want to share your video, but don't force others who don't feel comfortable to share their videos. Be respectful of that person's personality and what they are and what they need to do. And one of the interesting things, Mason, you talked about, we would always sometimes go in each other's room, we go to the whiteboard, and we have that communication. If I know that that's the way we work together, when I reach out to you, I'm going to reach out to you with the intent of saying, hey, let me show you something. Let me talk to you about what I'm thinking. And you basically, all you're doing is replacing me getting up and going to to your office, or you coming to my office. I'm basically saying, let's pull up a share. Let's pull up a whiteboard. And then you have that conversation. So there are technologies out there that allow us to do the same thing that we did every day in the office. We have to be willing to do that mind shift and embrace those technologies.
So I really like what you're saying, because I am married to my whiteboard, and I think I speak in whiteboard. And so what I'm hearing from you is, if there are people like me and teams like me who like that spur of the moment type of work, then invest or investigate the tools that you can use to communicate in that manner. That's great. All right. I know we're about 7 minutes out.
Can I mention one thing just to add to what Keith was saying in terms of, the private space and the video? I would say that, it's, again, to echo on what he was saying, it's okay for the others not to feel like they want to share the video, but, for the person that wants to connect, that has been connecting that way, I think it's better to maybe have one-on-one meetings with them, right? And I think there's nothing wrong in asking for the video when they're in the one-on-one meeting. Again, there's this fear of being judged when you're in a group setting and when you share the video. But in the one-on-one meeting, it's just you and the other person. So that's, something that they can try as well.
Really good point. Okay. I want to switch to a very important topic. There's team building. There's bonding in teams that's required in order to get ideation into implementation. Then there's a social component to work. Not everything's about spreadsheets and whiteboarding. Bhavani, start us off. I've heard you evangelize the need for that bonding in teams to have trust to get the work out. How are we going to do that moving forward, at least in the new norm for now, as we're all dispersed?
I think it's important for the leadership, again, to make sure that, they're revisiting everything that they once had as a corporate culture, right? I would say share your annual goals again, right? Revisit what you have accomplished. And I think that kind of helps everybody to ground as a company in terms of, what their connection is to the bigger picture. I'll give you an example, right? I mean, I coach at a healthcare company, and I'm sure a lot of the healthcare companies are having to update their policies to accommodate the COVID-19. And, it's really commendable how soon and how quickly they were able to implement that one, change in order for their members to allow the eligibility of the member benefits. So, I think that sends a positive vibe to the rest of the company, and that's something that's so critical in such time-sensitive manner that they were able to achieve, and remotely. So I think that's, something that tells a positive message to everybody in their workforce. Not only that, you can achieve it, not only you can do it, but, that the company is right behind them in all of this.
Gotcha. Keith, 30 seconds before we go to questions. Your thoughts on that?
I can't disagree with Pavani said. What I've done as a former functional manager, and you have teams that may be dislocated for a particular point in time, is having an open phone line. Where we do that for when you're doing back in the day when you did support calls or you had an outage, you would open up an open bridge. Believe it or not, having that open bridge, and there'll be, if you have it on for a significant period of time, there'll be minutes where you don't hear anything, but there'll be times when you just hear just idle conversations. Encouraging the conversation that would happen in a team room, to be able to do that when you're remote is key to making sure that collaboration, especially in the beginnings of some of these initiatives or projects, is key. And I think that is paramount to being able to functionally be able to function in those particular ways of thinking. So just simply having an open bridge line and allowing for that free flowing conversation. And what I've always done is Bhavani mentioned leadership. As a leader, what I've done is purposely engaged in conversation for the purpose of making people feel easier, bringing down those walls, celebrating our failures, celebrating when you don't get it right.
You are good at that, and I do kind of miss that. We've been doing it on Teams, but that's a really good point. So we got a few minutes left. I do want to get at least a couple questions in. First question, Bhavani, what should managers do or not do different prior to all this happening? Should managers shift the way they operate with their teams?
Well, it's a relative question, right? When they're saying should managers shift from what they're operating, we don't know how they have been operating today. So without knowing, I'm just gonna assume for a positive intent and say if you have been available to your teams, be available more. If you have been meeting with your team members once a month, make it once a week. And then, try not to get into the bottom of, all the time in terms of just your work, right? Also be available to them from a personal front. I think a lot of folks would appreciate that. This has come up I did an emergency or, out of sync team norm session just yesterday with the team. And this was something that came up to them or came up in the meeting was, we want people to notice us as people, not just as team members, not just as workforce, have that empathy. So I think that's important. And one of the leaders actually took it and he actually, put together an email and he's sending it I think it's once a week now. We got the second email this week, yesterday, where he was talking about, I'm here, I'm available. As Keith was mentioning, he had his office hours open, and that kind of helps, right? That kind of helps people to understand that my leader is also vulnerable at this moment, at this time, and if he is there, he understands what I'm going through. So I think it's that connection, right, that you build with your workforce. Whether you're a manager or a leader or whomever you are.
All right. Next question's a little longer, but it comes back to videos. The question is, my team is fine with audio, but refuses to be on video. They make jokes about it because they're in their jammies. They haven't had their hair done in a long time. I would prefer to see them, to have it, to be more interactive. I don't like talking to a screen but rather talk to their faces. I feel it hurts productivity of the meeting because a lot is lost without that body language. How do I balance their desire for privacy with my own feelings about productive meetings? I know you guys kind of touched on it, but a lot of folks don't want their morning look to be broadcast. What do you do about that?
Keith, you want to take it?
Yeah, that's funny, actually. Yeah, I never want my morning face to be pictured. I think this is going to be a little bit of a challenge. I think it's twofold. I think first you have to ask, is there a way, I think Bhavani mentioned it, speak to folks one-on-one and find out what their issues are, maybe set times of the day where we are going to be on camera so that they can prepare it. I would suggest you don't do it first thing in the morning. Let people get used to getting up in the morning, and set a tone, say like at 10:30 if you want to do that first in, and have a face-to-face call maybe as part of your stand-up. The second thing is you are going to have to change the way as a manager you lead. And that may be uncomfortable to managers that are used to seeing people, that like to see the faces, because that's how they are productive. And I think the change is going to happen on both ends. So I always say, yes, try to encourage that. Try to get maybe some of your acquired leaders within your team to start doing it and kind of do that positive peer pressure. But then also you're going to have to change the way in which you perceive productivity. And hopefully that will bring some of that out.
All right. So we've got time for one more question live. I encourage you to send your questions even afterwards. We will get them answered. Our last live question is, what is the easiest option virtually to promote osmotic communication within the Agile team? How can we get that Agile osmotically? Bhavani, how are you telling folks to share the love of Agile when we're all sitting at home?
So we were just talking about this at my work right before the webinar. One thing that we have started doing is open Slack channels and HipChat, and I think I've found that to be the best bet so far, and also maybe Teams, like the Microsoft Teams. Those are something that comes to my mind, especially the Slack channel, right? It's always available to you. Outside of the office hours, I think I have found those to be useful.
Okay. And you know what? I'm going to take it back, talk about Agile and pivoting. They are, I think we have a couple more minutes we can run. Someone's asking, and Keith, I'm going to give this to you. How important is it to have written policies about telework?
I think it's important. And in fact, I think, don't think about it as telework. I know in a DMV where we are, the Washington metropolitan area, where we're about 70% government, the form is used telework. What I tell companies, what I advise them is, have kind of remote work or work dynamic, so that you're not tied to a physical desk or chair, even within the office structure of the building. Have that as a part of your culture. The idea is, when I hear about telework policies and things of that nature, what I'm hearing about accountability. How do I know you're getting work done? Well, we know as effective leaders in these times, the way things are done, everyone works differently. We should be more focused on results and productivity, not on, are you adhering to a rigid schedule and delivering, I want to see what I call bobbing heads on a regular basis so that I know people are actually getting work done. We talked about this early in the beginning. Your policy should reflect your culture: transparency, respect for the individual, and accountability. If you do that, it doesn't matter if everyone's in the office, if they're telework, or if they're remote. That will translate that behavior all the way through. And be flexible. Go ahead, Bhavani.
Yeah, I just want to add something to that. Well, it's important to allow everybody to work at their own pace and be results oriented. It's also important to make sure that you do have that window where everybody is available, right? Whether it is 10 to 3 or 9 to 2, whatever. Because otherwise, if I say that, hey, I prefer to work after hours, and that's when I'm more productive, because then my family is sleeping, and we can't really connect well at that point.
Yeah, it should be 4 hours.
Totally get with 4 hours. Yeah. All right. So I know we've run over. There's one comment I'm going to pull out of the questions. I think it's very germane to all this. Someone from the BCBS world mentioned, I find giving resources, no matter who they are, right? Goals and keeping them accountable to them is more important than ever. And I think I totally agree with that. I'd like to thank Keith and Bhavani for sharing some really good tips. We hope to do this more often. I want to give you a little bit of background. A lot of this information is not just subject matter expert information. We work in both small and large businesses. We're aggregating every day what our teams are doing, what our customers are doing. So to me, it's like, all right, how can we find day-to-day best practices? This best practice might not have existed 2 weeks ago, but we're realizing, all right, maybe it's time to give people space on video. So in that, thank you for joining. Reach out to me if you have additional questions as we get through this new norm. I hope you all safety. Thank you for joining. Talk to you next time.